Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. I just want to make sure that we cover all of the time zones of those who are attending our webinar today. Welcome to another webinar that's brought to us by Cypher Learning in collaboration with Turnitin. Our webinar title for today is Redefining Student Assessment in Remote Learning. This is going to be very exciting because we have two amazing guest speaker for this webinar from Turnitin and from BAC Education in Malaysia. I will introduce them later on. So let me just give you a quick overview. By the way, I am Jen Padernal. I'm currently the Global EdTech Director for Cypher Learning. I am also an educator. That's why I'm very excited about this webinar. I know that the teachers who are attending this webinar today are also very excited to learn about how we can use Turnitin as a tool. Right now, I'm giving away the kind of like what's in store for our webinar today. So I'm just gonna have a quick overview. Let's go back a little bit. Let's do a trip down the memory lane just very quickly. You remember how we struggled in 2000 and to 2021, right? When this extraordinary phenomenon happened, the so-called pandemic, and then we woke up one day, and then the government tells us, "Hey, you're not going to school anymore. You're gonna have to stay home and teach remotely." And we were like stunned, and I remember imagining the minions where we don't know what we're going to do. But we teachers are very resourceful. We always find a way. This kinds of phenomenon and natural disasters that's happening globally are impacting education a lot. We have experienced a lot of this natural disaster, bushfire in Australia, in the US, flooding in the Philippines and all the other parts of the world. We have heat waves, we have cyclones, we have earthquakes. I live in the Philippines, and I can relate to this very, very much. We are a disaster prone country. So think of all of the natural disasters. Probably most of them, we have them in our country. And when natural disaster happens, one of the most impacted really is the education sector. One of the research done in Australia before says that natural disasters impact education in the sense that there's a poor academic performance among children that's being affected by this disaster, like the bushfire that happened in Australia. There's also physical and psychological injuries. There's delayed or lost in educational achievements. In-person classes are canceled. There's loss of collaborative experiences when these natural disasters are happening and classes are canceled. So, we don't go to school, we don't meet our students physically or face to face. And then one of the biggest challenge when the pandemic happened is that examinations and assessments are disrupted. We got used to doing traditional way of doing our assessment. And when the pandemic happened and we have to teach remotely or we have to give assessments online, there's a lot of things that worry us teachers, right? A lot of things that we're thinking. How are my students going to answer their assessments? Are they going to how are we going to maintain the integrity of our assessments? Are they going to open books? Are they going to open web browser? Those are the things that are in our mind as educators, like a lot of things. So the impact really of the pandemic in the education sector is really huge. But despite all of these challenges, this is still what we want to happen as an educator, as educators. We want our students to be ready. We want them to continuously learn. And as educators, we want to continuously teach. We want to make sure that our learners are developing the right skills. We want them to continuously be able to do the activities that we have prepared for them, the assessments, all of those stuffs. But at the same time, we want them to learn the value of honesty and integrity, whether they're learning inside the classroom or outside of the classroom. This is very important. And I feel you as an educator. I know that you worry a lot about the integrity of the test, the integrity of the activities. All of those stuffs are kind of like super worrisome for us. But there's a way by which we can do this, right? Assessment is an important aspect of teaching and learning. There's so many things that we want to do so that we know that we are evaluating and making sure that we're helping our students to continuously learn. And one of the activities, one of the things that we do is we provide assessments, right? But we want to think of different ways by which we can do assessments, wherein you don't have to worry whether on the thoughts that are my students actually learning? Am I keeping how am I keeping the integrity of the assessment? And this is the reason why we have this webinar. We have I'm super excited because we have two amazing speakers who will share with us how we can redefine, how we can change the way that we view assessments, the way that we do assessment, and the way that we check our assessment. So to give you a brief overview of the session, what we are going to do today is that we will showcase some of the best practices on how you can redefine, how you can transform, how you can modernize the way that the students are creating their works and submitting their assessment, and how teachers can creatively create assessment. I really like this because I'm also an advocate of the uh, redefining the way that we're doing assessment. There's so many ways by which we can do this. We will also talk about a very important and amazing tool that we can use, okay, to help our teachers, to help our students redefine the way that we're doing our assessment. Okay, it's very important providing feedback to the learners. How can we check our assessments in real time? How can we provide feedback in real time? How can we maintain the integrity of the assessments if you're worrying about that? But later on, we'll have a very nice discussion about assessment integrity and the letter C that the teachers are always worried about when they're doing when they're giving online assessment. So this webinar will also provide us with insights on the importance of the academic integrity and fostering the value of honesty among learners, but at the same time sharing best practices on how we can transform the way that we do assessments without thinking of how the students are going to achieve it or the ways that the students will achieve or submit their assessment. We will share with you benefits of moving from a closed book exam to an open book assessment and demonstrate how Turnitin, and this is part of the exciting part, how Turnitin and NEO LMS can be used together in providing student assessment and in helping teachers and students create an interactive, engaging assessment. So without further ado, I will introduce to you our first speaker for today, that is going to give us an idea on how we can use Turnitin as a tool. Our first speaker for today is Miss Purna Post. She's the managing training and she's manager training and implementation in Turnitin. Purna is currently she's a certified project management professional, agile certified practitioner, and certified scrum master. She has 20 years plus of experience in development and delivery of learning projects across various organizations like that of IBM, Cognizant, Tata Interactive Systems, etc. So imagine our first speaker for today having this profile. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Ms. Purna Bose for our first speaker for today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that Purna can share her screen. Hi, Purna.
Hey, hi. Thanks so
There
much,
you
Jen.
are.
Wonderful introduction. Let me just share my screen quickly. And a nice and warm welcome to, sorry. Right. A very warm welcome to all our participants here. So my name is Purna Bose, and I lead the training and implementation team for Turnitin South Asia. And thanks, Jen, so much for providing such an insightful idea about the importance of assessment. And with assessment, of course, what becomes intrinsic is feedback. So as we start today, I want to understand what is been your thoughts about using formatic feedback in your classroom? Now think about what you have done in the past and also what your plan is for in maybe the upcoming year. And we do know that a lot of things might have changed, as compared to how it happened pre-COVID, during COVID, and now that we are all getting back to the offline mode again, post-COVID, hopefully. Now, as you think about the use of formative feedback, what comes to your mind as the most difficult part? So please feel free to share your thoughts on chat, and I will come back to it as I move forward in my session. So this is what I plan to cover today. So we'll try to understand the importance of feedback and, most importantly, effective and formative feedback. We'll try to list the useful features that are available for educators who are using Turnitin Feedback Studio. That's the tool that I believe you have access to from Turnitin. We'll see how you can use that tool, to create a formative environment for your students. What could be the recommended workflow that you could follow? And also, last but not the least, focus a little bit on the similarity report, not purely from the plagiarism perspective that you would probably be using it so far, but also from the perspective of how much feedback the report itself can give the educators as well as the students. Please keep sharing your thoughts on chat because that will be useful for us and we can learn from each other for sure. So feedback is essentially and invariably a huge part of any classroom, no matter what subject or grade level you may teach, and no matter if you're teaching online or offline. Now, before we get too far, I want to review some definitions just to be sure that you are all starting from the same understanding. Feedback in general is any information that is provided about how one is doing in an effort to reach a goal. Now, from the education perspective, this goal could be the learning objectives. From student perspective, whatever they're planning to learn, that could be their goal. So what is it that is coming to them in order for them to understand whether or how much they have been able to achieve that goal. Now, if you dig one level deeper, we can see a difference in the types of feedback that can be offered. So there is, of course, summative feedback, or feedback that normally occurs at the end of the study with no opportunity to revise, and of course, formative feedback, which is usually ongoing and encourages revision based on new understandings. And this is where we are going to focus our discussion today. Now, we've seen that effective feedback can have a greater impact on student performance than direct instructions, any behavioral intervention program, or even the socioeconomic status of the student. Whether in person or in a remote environment, the impact of feedback on learning can be huge. Research from Dr. John Hattie and Dr. Robert Marzano has shown that feedback is among the greatest influence on student achievement, even greater than the socioeconomic status of the student. I'm mentioning this just to put this in the context. So we know that socioeconomic status can have an immense impact on student achievement. So being able to contextualize the influence that feedback can have, or maybe even greater, makes it very real just how important quality feedback is when it comes to encouraging students in their education. But remember, the key here is to ensure that the feedback becomes effective and usable by the students. And that really brings us to the next slide, on whereby we'll focus on what are the 5 main principles that contribute to creating effective feedback for students. Feedback has to be accurate, so it should depict accurate information about a work and offer a valid suggestion. It should be timely, and this is one of the most important aspects. The sooner feedback is received, students are more willing to make a correction. It should be relevant. Feedback should be aligned to the stated expectations of the assignment. So we are assuming that when you're giving an assignment or an assessment to the students, there are some expectations that are stated, maybe in the form of rubrics, maybe in the form of discussions, but students are aware as to what is being expected from them, and the feedback should be aligned to that. Definitely actionable. So it's important to provide next steps with enough guidance, but of course not giving away the correct answer. And last but not the least, it should be accessible. Now, feedback should keep in mind the readiness level of the student to ensure that the student is able to comprehend what is being said as part of this feedback. So I did mention in my last slide that timely is very important. It's really the most important feedback that we need to think about today. We know that instant feedback is best feedback. At least 60% of students say that they're likely to actually use feedback that they receive during their work process. But we also understand that humanly, as educators, as teachers, it might be very difficult for you to achieve that, considering all of the other responsibilities that you are tasked with on a day-to-day basis. So how can we provide timely feedback that can effectively make a difference in the quality of learning? What tools do you have available? So herein, let me give you a view of the Turnitin Feedback Studio, or the tool that you have available to you that can help you really achieve this, process of giving timely and effective feedback to students. Now, a lot of you might be already aware of Similarity report that can help you safeguard academic integrity. And I will definitely talk about what other feedback that you can achieve. But there are also some great feedback tools that come with Feedback Studio. It's really a multifaceted approach in providing resources that can help educators with the right feedback, so they can provide the right feedback at the right time and in a way that can be useful for them. So we have grade mark tools, and I think Jennifer, going forward, will give you a view of the platform, but I'm just trying to explain the features that are available to you and how you can best leverage that in your daily work life. So grade mark tools really help you streamline your grading and feedback process. There are various options available, like adding rubrics, quick marks, text comments, voice comments, and I'll talk about those. There's also a very useful language enhancements tool that is available to the students. It's called ETS Editor. Now, this is actually a bit different from what you'd get a standard spelling and grammar check that comes with probably MS Word or Google Docs, because it not only tells the students about what they need to change, but also if the student is interested, can provide a theory behind the change that is being suggested. And the objective is that the student will learn from that revision that he or she is making, and going forward can apply that learning in their future assignments as well. All right, so what are the roles that can help you, create that that workflow that I will be talking about? Of course, we have an administrator who can who manages your account, creates the instructor accounts for you, and have access to user statistics. But our focus is on instructors, or which is like Turnitin's terminology to define anyone who's in the teaching role, the one who will be reviewing assessments, reviewing revisions, reviewing assignments, or providing feedback, the mentors, the guide, the faculty members, whatever is your terminology. Instructors can create classes, they can add students, and they can create assignments. And last but not the least, most importantly, review the Similarity report and provide meaningful feedback to the students. Then, of course, the students, they can submit papers to the assignments that are being created by the students. They can also self-join a class. So within Feedback Studio, educators have access to a wide variety of feedback tools, as I mentioned. So rubrics can help communicate student progress towards task expectations. And these rubrics, if you're adding to your assignments, will be visible to the students even before they submit it. They know that how they will be assessed based on what criteria, what skills, and the exact definition of those. There are quick marks, and I'll talk about that as well. There are inline, bubble comments, summary comments that you can provide in the text format. There are voiced comments that you can record. Up to 3 minutes of voice recording is available, and you don't need to do that at one go. There can be breaks, because sometimes we believe that the voice modulation of the instructor can be very effective in providing the correct feedback, which may not be as visible from a text comment. And then, of course, there are peer mark assignments that you can create. So within Feedback Studio, you actually can create a wide variety of rubrics. And this comes as part of your subscription. So these can really help you address the 5 principles of effective feedback. You can create a purely qualitative rubric, a quantitative rubric that can be used to actually deduce the grade points for the students. So if you're creating an assignment that's like has associated points, then the rubrics can be created in a way that they can be applied to the grade point as well, or a grading form. And all users have the ability to create their own rubrics to use, or if you are creating one at your account level, or some instructor creates it for a similar assignment, you can always share the same with each other. So that's perfectly possible. So it does not mean that everyone has to create a rubric afresh every time that you're trying to use it. Now, each of those rubrics can be paired with an associated quick mark set that is also included in your Feedback Studio account. Quick marks are really drag and drop comments that can be applied to student work, reducing the need for you to write the same thing over and over again. For certain kind of assignments, you know that these are like the very common feedback. So you can actually add that set. And as you are reviewing the similarity report from the same interface, you have your grade mark tools, that there is a blue layer that typically designates the grade mark tool, and you will have your quick mark set available, and you can drag and drop them. Even if you have not added a quick mark earlier, and you, while reviewing the paper, you probably see that, okay, there is a common feedback that you're needing to use, you can convert a comment to a quick mark on the go and add it as well. So you can use it going forward. So very useful and very flexible. Then another great feature of Feedback Studio is the peer mark tool. Now, this really enables students to provide peer feedback on their classmates' work. This can empower students to give high quality feedback to each other in a structured environment that you control as the instructor. There are provided feedback forms available, or you can create your own that works specifically with an assignment in your class. What is most important for peer mark feedback is to very clearly define the expectations from the students while providing feedback. And with all these tools, we need to keep in mind the 5 principles to be accurate, to be relevant, to ensure that the feedback is tied to the expectations set at the beginning of the assignment, to be timely. Of course, that is the reason why these are built in the tool, so you can provide the feedback real time. Making the feedback actionable and accessible really depends on how you define them and how well you articulate the information that you're willing to share with your students. So I did mention that we'll talk about a workflow that you can create using the various features that you have available in the tool. So when you create an assignment, you will see that you are defining a start date, a due date, and a post date. Now, post date is essentially the date from when your students will be able to see the feedback that you are providing them. So we recommend that you keep this post date as close to the start date as possible, so that students have the option of reviewing the feedback, making necessary corrections, incorporating the feedback in their work, and resubmitting the feedback before that due date is achieved. Some of the settings that you need to ensure is set in a certain way so that students are able to revise their work based on your feedback, so that this really creates a formative environment for them. There is an option for you to choose generate similarity reports for student submission, and usually see three submissions there. Always choose immediately, can overwrite reports until due date. If you choose the first or the last one, then although the students will be able to see the similarity report, they will not have an option to revise it. So either the similarity report will be available to them once. So even if they can see the feedback, they will not have a chance to have a revised assignment submission, or on the due date. In that case, they can only see the feedback but not do anything about it. Of course, allow students to see the similarity report. Please ensure you set that to yes, because otherwise the whole feedback is missed by them. And please understand that students, a lot of times we hear, a lot of apprehension around students misusing the system. So there are checks and balances that are built in. So even if they're resubmitting an assignment, of course, which they can do till the due date unless you've allowed late submissions, after 3 resubmissions, the tool automatically blocks them for submission. So they will have a 24 hours gap after which they can resubmit. This is done to ensure that they are not misusing the tool. And then last but not the least, for submit papers, to select either institution paper repository if you are keen on doing, checking on class solutions. So if you want to check if the students are doing some kind of copying from each other, then that's the choice, or select no repository, in which case your papers will not be added to any repository. The reason we say that do not choose standard paper repository at this point is that if you choose that, it gets added to the student paper repository of Turnitin, and any revised version of the assignment will throw a high similarity with the previous version, which will not be the case if you're choosing institution paper repository, because that ensures you can check for class solution. So any papers which are added to that, your institution papers which are internal to your institutions, will come up as a source of similarity, but your papers will not be added to the global repository. Now that we've talked about the features and the tools that are available to you as part of the GradeMark tool, let's look at how the similarity report can help you get very useful feedback. Now, one thing to understand here is that to understand how the similarity index or that percentage comes up. Now, in the simplest terms, the higher the number, the greater your similarity between your work and other sources. So when you submit a content for checking in the Turnitin Feedback Studio, the bot essentially crawls a huge repository that Turnitin has access to, which can be student papers, internet pages, both current and archived, as well as a huge repository of journals. We have an exclusive partnership with Crossref. So all those content are crawled to give you that similarity. Now, it does not necessarily mean that that is plagiarism. The follow-up question we always have, and irrespective of which part of the globe we are talking, is that what is a good score? The trick is that there's no single answer to that question. There isn't a number that is right answer, because that number, what that number means really depends on a lot of variables. So it could be the kind of assignment, the kind of subject, the kind of expectations, your institution's acceptable policy can define what is a good score and what is not. But there are some guidelines that can help you interpret that number and decide whether it is good or not. Now, most important to understand is that 0% is not the goal. A lot of people start out assuming that any number above 0% is bad. So that is not correct. There is almost always a level of what we call expected text similarity. It means that there are certain elements that we expect to show an overlap with other sources. Very common examples will be common facts, quotations, the references that you are providing. Those are very, very likely to trigger similarity, but they're certainly not plagiarism. But in most of these cases, Turnitin solutions have filters, which you can, that allow you to see if these elements are impacting your percentage, and you can filter them out if you find them acceptable. And that's where your role as a reviewer becomes very important. But what if you think, what are the different scenarios where you think maybe your score is a little bit to worry about? So the first question we often have is, what if my score is too high? Now, this means that too much of your writing is coming from other sources, or another way to look at it is there aren't enough of your ideas in the paper. So what can you do about that? First, you might want to balance out the information that you use from text with your own ideas. But ensure whatever your students are using, they are citing that information. So that makes all the difference in determining what is unexpected similarity and what becomes academic misconduct. Now, the other end of the spectrum, what if the score is too low? Now, people often don't think about this much, but this kind of score is also potentially problematic. One of the first things you have to consider here is that exactly what kind of writing assignment is this? If this is a creative writing assignment, then it just might be fine if there is a very low similarity score. But If it is an assignment where you are expected to collect and synthesize information or use evidence to support and elaborate on your ideas, then this is really just as big a problem as in terms of the score as is a high score. This is not about plagiarism, because it means that too little of your paper comes from other sources, or maybe you don't have much support or evidence for your ideas, which may not be the correct thing to go about it. So first step, again, is to make sure that you balance your own ideas with information from other sources that can validate them. Now, a couple of other scenarios that typically comes up is that where, what happens if a lot of your similarity is coming from a single source, or do you have huge sections that are predominantly from a source or a group of sources? Now, if you have huge section that comes from a source, you have to make sure that you evaluate whether all of that information is really required, or some of them you can express in your own thoughts and ideas and come up as original. Just pick up the most important ideas to include in your paper, and that should help you balance your ideas with the outside sources. Again, some other, again, the other side of the spectrum, what if whole sections of a student's paper are only their words and no outside sources? Again, make sure you consider the specific writing assignment and whether that's appropriate. Where might a powerful quote or a statistic help to clarify or strengthen, the ideas that your students are trying to express? If you go point by point and look at an outside source to bring in, you will probably move in towards a better balance. But again, last but not the least, it is very important to cite if you are using information from other sources. There is also a all sources section in the similarity report, which can help you also get a validation of the sources that you're using and ensure that your sources are credible. So with that, I will probably end my discussion, and I'll be happy to take up any questions that are there. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Purna. Thank you for sharing with us the importance of providing timely feedback on the output and activities that are being done by our learners. This is very important for me as a teacher as well. I really like to provide timely feedback to my learners so that they know how they're doing. So this is a very important aspect for students to be able to improve their work. This is kind of like part of the goals that we have as educators, to make sure that our students are able to improve their work, to improve their assessment, to improve their output. Another important aspect that Purna mentioned is intervention. This one I like as well, because we want to make sure that our students are able, we are able to develop early interventions to our students who need it the most. And having a tool like Turnitin is going to help us do that. You probably are realizing now that Turnitin is more than just a plagiarism checker. This is not just a tool to check whether our students' work is original or authentic. There's more to it than that. And imagine if this tool is combined with another powerful tool, which is NEO LMS, another favorite tool of mine that I use in teaching and learning. NEO LMS is a powerful digital tool for teaching and learning, which integrated Turnitin into this platform. So what we're going to do next is we have another speaker who will showcase to us how this two powerful tool, when used together, can really redefine and help the way that the students are producing their output and the teachers are creating their assessments. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our next amazing speaker. She is the Chief Digital Officer in the Learning and Experience Department at BAC Education Group in Malaysia. She's an expert in strategy formulation, product design, client management, learning design and development, digital transformation, and customer experience. She is responsible for the development and implementation of EdTech and digital engagements, or engagement strategies rather, for 12 clients ranging from primary, secondary, and tertiary education providers in Malaysia. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all welcome Jennifer Lowe.
Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Learning from Jen. Thank you for having me. I'm Jennifer Lowe, and I'm from the BAC Education Group. It's nice to be here. It's nice to see everybody on this this wonderful morning here in Malaysia. Well, basically, as Jen had already mentioned, I was part of the team that basically implemented the entire teaching and learning journey in the digital world for most of our students. Within the BAC education group, we have 5 different institutions. But before I go into that, I'll just quickly share my screen. All right. Everyone's able to see my screen? Is this okay? Now let me go. Computers. All right. Yeah. So within the BAC education group, yes, within the BAC education group, there are basically 8 different areas of study. This is important so that, you know, I create some form of context. There's a chat. Okay, yeah. So basically, just to provide a context on the area of study that we are in as BAC education group, so that it will be more, well, my sharing will be more relatable to some of you who are on this webinar as well. So yeah, we provide pre-university studies, law, business. In fact, law and business are 2 of our biggest areas, right? We also have a media and communication school, which is very project-based which is based on project-based learning. They do a lot of industry attachments as well. We also have digital technology, hospitality, early childhood education, as well as psychology. So this will provide a context into what kinds of assessments, and I'm sure we can discuss that later on during our Q&A as well. Right. So since we're talking about redefining assessments, right? So in the past, a lot of our assessments, so when I say in the past, I mean before COVID, before we implemented this whole digital thing that's happening. In the past, it's always been MCQ, true and false, in the piece of paper, right? Or write an essay in a piece of paper as well. If there's going to be a case study, it's going to be, you know, from your brain to the paper. And it's all physically proctored exams, right? So we have all our students seated in a room, right? And we have invigilators walking around, kind of policing our students, right? But now things have changed, right? Today, basically, you know, I like to talk about how COVID is basically the CTO of our company, because it basically drove digital transformation in an exponential rate for our lecturers, our teaching staff, as well as our students as well, right? So today, everybody, all our lecturers, all our students across all our institutions have moved to online proctored exams. And even more so, I would say like maybe 10% or below 10% is moved to online proctored exam. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on, maybe in my presentation or maybe in the Q&A as well, on why that is what it is. Online proctored exam is mainly used for our pre-university students, right? So this is where, you know, they sit for an exam, their cameras are on, we have invigilators proctoring them via the laptop camera, right? So that's used very minimally, but most of our students from, you know, degree, pre-university as well, degree all the way up to, you know, students who are doing their masters with us or their PhD with us, we use the Turnitin software, which Purna had already shared earlier. Basically, we use Turnitin for most of our assessments, including their final exams as well, right? And I'll show that how that looks like for our students and our lecturers in a while, right? So, I mean, all of us are educators, and Bloom's taxonomy is something, you know, we all know it, right? About remembering, about understanding, about applying, analyzing, you know, some of these concepts, right? And evaluating them, making judgments, and then eventually creating something new out of the knowledge and the concepts that we have learned. So these are the 6 different levels of the Bloom's taxonomy. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because of the various forms of assessments which are tied to the Bloom's taxonomy. So if you look at the lower part, which is remembering and understanding, that's basic, right? That's lower order thinking skills, which we are all familiar with. And then you have the higher order thinking skills, which requires students to apply what they have learned, to be able to, synthesize what they have learned, and then identifying concepts, putting concepts together, connecting different concepts and coming up with something different, something new, something original, right? And those can only be done when, you're writing an essay, when you're doing a case study, or you're working on projects or building your portfolio, or having a presentation in class, whether in class or online, right? And that can be done whether it's a face-to-face or an online mode. And why I wanted to bring this up is because this is exactly how we have transformed assessments within the BAC education group. Like I said earlier, in the past, we are very focused on pen and paper, brain to paper, right? It's a lot of basically regurgitating whatever we had learned, right? So I've learned A, B, and C, and now I have to rewrite A, B, and C in paper. But we've moved, right? Education has moved, even the economy has moved. We're no longer in factories, right? Working in factories where we are asked to do task A, B, and C, and this is how you do A. Did you complete this checklist, and did you complete that checklist? So it's no longer that. Now we are all knowledge workers. We're constantly innovating. We're constantly thinking creatively, and education has to move along those lines as well. And this is why the entire BAC education group has basically, yes, it was driven by COVID, but what we had done was we basically re-looked at all our assessments, right? Initially, of course, at the early part of at the early part of COVID, we basically just transformed all our assessments into online format. But over time, we realized that, you know what, we need to transform our questions as well. And so we basically re-looked at every single question and basically turning them into case studies, turning them into application questions, application of concepts and ideas, and asking students to come up with something original. For example, like writing a business proposal, writing a marketing plan, evaluating an industry if it's an economics paper, for example, or writing a proposal, whether it's a media concept, how do you want to run your social media campaign and things like that, and even project-based learning as well, right? So this is basically how we had moved from traditional, very pen and paper, right, types of assessments into something that targets more of the higher order thinking skills. And this is very, very important because it basically shapes the way of our students thinking as well, which I'll go into in a bit, right? So basically in the past, because we were very pen and paper oriented, our Turnitin, we implemented Turnitin many years ago, right? We have it available, we use it for assignments, right? But it was never integrated within our learning management system. But because now, basically every single assessment, we're using Turnitin. So we had actually integrated Turnitin within our learning management system because it provides a better experience, not just for our students, but also for our lecturers, right? And what are the outcomes, right? As a result of all of this, whether it's the transformation of the kind of assessments that we're making, or even the integration itself in terms of technical system integrations, right? Now, in terms of the outcomes for students, right? We have moved from very brain to paper, kind of just regurgitating whatever we've learned, right? Not so much of application. Now we've moved to more application type knowledge. And we all know that when we are applying knowledge and we are coming up with something that's original, something that's new, it becomes more meaningful to us. And when I say meaningful, that means you remember it better, you're more emotionally attached to whatever case study or whatever presentation that you worked on. And hence, you're able to remember, your retention of knowledge is a lot more meaningful, a lot more impactful, and you remember those things, those concepts, those ideas many, many, many years down the road, right? So it becomes a more meaningful learning experience for our students. It also empowers students to produce their best original work. I like that Purna brought up the importance of immediate feedback, because that's exactly what we get from a system like Turnitin, right? Especially if it is integrated with NEO LMS, because immediately, in our case, right? So say, for example, if a lecturer puts in some comment, some feedback, immediately I can see it on my LMS. A lecturer can then just prompt me with a message. I would also get a notification on my phone if I have it downloaded, the app downloaded on my phone, and I would immediately get a notification or an email telling me that, look, your lecturer has sent you a message to go and, review some of the comments that were left in your assessment, right? So it empowers students to continuously improve and continuously produce the best work that they can put out for their assignment, right? And with the integration, it creates a more seamless experience. Like the example I just gave earlier, because of NEO LMS and because of the integration, I can now basically just go to the learning management system and I can see everything from my scores to the feedback to getting notifications on email, on web, as well as on my phone. And so as a student, I don't have to worry and I don't have to stress about whether, my lecturer is going to give me any feedback and stuff like that. It keeps communication very, very transparent as well. And we're able to look back in any communication, any history that was communicated prior to this, right? And on the other hand, for faculty members, right, I can't stress this enough, right? You do it once and you're basically just saving time for the rest of the semester, right? So what a lot of our lecturers do is they would set up their assessments, because most of our lecturers would already have all their assessments prepared. They kind of have an idea of what it's going to be. So they prepare early ahead of time, right? And they would start putting it into the system and they can set the timing, the start date, the end date, just as what Purna had shared earlier, right? And again, going back to seamless experience, for a lecturer's perspective, when I create these assessments and put it in beforehand, I can set the timing when I want the paper to be published to my students so that they can start working on the assessments or the exam and stuff like that. Those can be set way ahead of time. And so it saves time. In terms of grading, traditionally, our lecturers would have to set aside time, an entire day sometimes, or an entire week sometimes, just, flipping papers, looking at papers, grading them one by one and things like that, and then tabulating them into an Excel sheet or something to then be passed on to the exams department. Now, in terms of administrative work, it becomes that much more seamless and time efficient, because all I have to do is, as a lecturer, which I will demo later in my presentation, basically a lecturer goes in, puts in all the comments, puts in the grade, automatically it goes into the system. The exams department can then just go in and export the Excel and would be able to see all the grades tabulated nicely in an Excel sheet, right? So whether it's in terms of grading or in terms of administration for the admin team, whether it's faculty members or the exams department or the program itself, right? Tabulation of scores and stuff like that saves a ton of time, right? The moment you have it integrated in your systems as well, into your tech stack, right? The other thing that I also want to point out is transparency. I mean, let's be honest, right? So when we tell a student, look, this particular paragraph, I believe you copied this, right? In the past, it would be I say, she say, and I justify and she justifies, right? But now, no longer do I have to go back and forth like this, because we have a system that would automatically help us to identify where the source is coming from. And no longer will I have to keep arguing, not just to students. I mean, let's be honest, I'm in institution level, right? We have parents coming in telling us that, hey, look, I believe my child did not copy and paste this particular paragraph. If we didn't have a system like Turnitin, I will then have to, go on Google or something, right, and try to justify. And even then, it can be disputed, right? So in terms of transparency, having a platform like Turnitin just gives me a peace of mind, I would say, right? I don't have to worry about, constantly having to justify why I'm giving that grade or why I'm accusing or saying that a student had copied this piece of work, right? So those are some of the main outcomes of, integrating the two systems and also, transforming the way we do assessments. All right, so now I'm going to go into a demo. For the student demo, I will be sharing a video, which is basically what we had prepared for students. So this is actually from the student view. Yes, so that's what basically the whole Turnitin platform and also within the NEO LMS looks like for our students. And that's basically the steps of how students can submit their assignments, look into their similarity reports. Of course, that similarity report has very, very high similarity scores, but that's because it's simple. But right now, I'm going to navigate off my screen and I'm going to share with you from the platform itself. All right, let me just switch my screen. All right. Okay, so what you see here is basically the assignment, or, because we use exams, we use the assignment tab for exams as well as for normal assignments as well. And basically we can have the instructions written out here right on the first page itself for the students to view, and then we can upload the assignment questions. So this is how we've done it. Of course, if there's other ways that you think is more efficient for your students, and feel free to make those changes, right? So we have basically, so I've downloaded this file just so that it's faster, but this is basically the exam question that we have prepared for the MBA program for Veritas University, which is one of our sister colleges, right? And basically, as you can see, a lot of our questions have now moved to application of concepts. Here, they're talking about the SWOT analysis because it's on strategic management, right? And also talking about, case study as well. How do I apply some of these concepts in a real world situation? And in this case, like question 1A is on a case study on Huawei. So I'm supposed to, as a student, go online, do my own research, find for a research paper, go to Huawei's website and things like that, and synthesize and apply the concepts that I had learned on SWOT analysis or whatever I've studied during the course of my semester and apply it to a company like Huawei, for example, right? So it changed our assignments or our exams to be more case study, more application of knowledge and concepts and things like that, all right? So now moving on back to the platform, basically, like I said, it saves a lot of time because I can basically set the start date and the due date. In fact, because it's fully integrated, I do not even need to navigate as a lecturer and even as an admin, right? I don't even need to navigate outside of this platform to make any of those changes, any of those settings. All settings can be tweaked within the LMS itself. And that's honestly the beauty of integration, right? I just love it. I don't ever go to Turnitin's website because everything I can get done in this platform itself, right? So going into my experience, say as a lecturer, right? Let's say, for example, I would go to grades. So this is assuming that, assignment's done. Now it's time to grade. In this case, the sample, it's already graded. And as you can see, any grades that has been input in Turnitin will automatically be added back into the LMS itself, all right? So say, for example, if I'm going to go into this student's paper, I would basically just go on show all grade, and I would click on this icon over here. I already had it open, so I will just share my screen so that you can see what it looks like, because I don't want to drag the time. All right. So as you can see here, this is basically the student's paper, right? We have the red ones here, which basically shows that it was copied from somewhere, right? Copied and pasted. But like Purna had mentioned earlier, it could be unintentional, right? It could be just concepts or specific quotes that I would like to take from a particular paper. All right. Now, where I want to draw your attention to is basically this part, which is very important for students and for lecturers as well, right? Where the similarity is. So in this case, the student has a similarity score of 8%. And as a lecturer, I'm able to see where the sources are coming from, right? 3% from this particular website, 2% from Wikipedia, etc., right? As a student, I can then come in here. So say, for example, if my similarity score is extremely high and my lecturer has highlighted that to me and said, look, you will need to relook into some of your, some of the paragraphs that you have written in your paper and revise and improve your paper, I can then come in here and really look into where the similarity scores are and make the changes as necessary. All right. Now, in terms of the lecturer view, Purna earlier had mentioned that we can add quick marks. So this is where, as you can see, these are quick marks that our lecturer had put in place. For example, here, tick, maybe a score, for example. Here, it lacks depth. Maybe a student will need to expound further, right? So these are very, very important, very, very good immediate feedback that the student can receive, and I mean, a lecturer can give and the student can receive, so that he or she can then, expound further and improve the paper further. All right. Now, moving on to this comment section. This is also something that Purna had mentioned earlier. This is the voice comment, right? So as a lecturer, sometimes, it's too difficult for me to explain lack of depth, for example, right? Maybe there are specific things that I want my student to address for this particular example or for this particular concept. And what I can do is, if it's too long for me to type everything out and it's more time efficient, like I said, technology is here to save time, right? So I can just, click on this record button and I'll be able to record a 3-minute long voice message for my student, all right? Or alternatively, I can also put in comments over here. So say, for example, I had looked into this entire paper that my student had written and I've graded the student 70. I'll just insert the scores up here. All right, and automatically it would appear in the student's learning management system as well. All right, so it would come over here immediately. And for earlier I mentioned a little bit about administratively how it really improves experience because, you know, exams department would be able to save time. They no longer have to, you know, take scores from a paper or scores from individual PDFs and tabulating them in an Excel format, which, by the way, you know, would open up room for human error and things like that. We don't want that, right? So what we can do with this integration, all scores would automatically come back into the LMS because it's integrated. And all I have to do is just click on Gradebook and export the entire Excel sheet. And so with that, we'll be able to save so much time. In the past, we would need to allocate one entire week, right? For our exams department, for our lecturers to just tabulate scores. 1 week for grading and 1 week for tabulation of scores, and just to double check and make sure that everything is correct, because, you know, when it comes to exams, can be a little bit touchy. Parents will get involved and we don't want all that drama, right? So now we only need a day or two maximum, just to make sure that we got it right. We exported everything, we've double checked, no error, numbers tally, things like that, and then we're good to go, right? And then on the student end, they would receive their scores via a notification that your paper had been graded. They can come in here, they can download their paper, they can see a live view of the comments, and they can also look at what is the similarity score that they've gotten for that particular paper that they had written. Yeah, so that's basically all that I have. I think I can take any questions that you may have in terms of, you know, the system, in terms of how do you transform assessments and things like that. I'll be happy to take on any questions. All right, back to you, Jen.
Wow. Thank you, Jen. That's amazing. Don't you think it's amazing, everybody? Thank you, Jennifer and Purna, for sharing those information and insights to us. Imagine these two powerful tools integrated together to help us transform our students' assessments and activities in a fast and easy way. One of the many things I love about being an educator is that the room for creativity is limitless. Limitless. That includes being creative and developing many different ways by which we can deliver our teaching materials, including assessments. As Jennifer mentioned, we're not limited to MCQ, to true or false, memorization type of assessments only. There is a lot of way by which we can transform the way that we're giving assessments, the way that we're preparing our learners. I also love it when Jennifer mentioned about Bloom's taxonomy, because our ultimate goal as educators is to make sure that our students are able to create and are able to put into application what we have taught them. So that way they're more ready for their future job. That's kind of like what we want for them to be able to do. We need to be able to help our students, our learners, to transform their knowledge into actions, into skills. That is why transforming our assessments and activities into something that will help develop our learners' analytical skills, creativity skills, problem solving skills is very important. This is how we prepare them for their future jobs. And we have a lot of tools to help us do that, like NEO LMS and Turnitin. I really love the demonstration that you did, Jennifer, and emphasizing how Turnitin can help improve the works of the learners. Turnitin is not just a plagiarism checker, not a tool, or NEO LMS in the same manner. They're not tools to police our students, but these are tools to help our students improve their work. Now, there's a couple of questions here that probably you can help us address. Let me just read those questions. So one of the questions is that when we do remote learning, do we always have to worry? And I know that this is normal for educators. Is it normal for us or do we always have to worry about our learners cheating their way out to creating or preparing their assessments or their output? Maybe Jennifer can take that one first.
I think I'll take that. Yeah, so like I mentioned in my presentation earlier, I think the economy, I think the human capital, the demand for human capital has changed tremendously over the years, right? And with that, at the core of it, education needs to change as well, right? No longer are we factory workers, right? No longer do we need to, we're given a checklist or tasks, and I'll need to memorize, what do I have to do, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever. It's no longer that. It's about, there's a problem, how do I solve the problem? Or there's something that's gone wrong, how do I solve this problem creatively? And I'll need to be original with that, right? So it's all about creative thinking. It's all about innovation. It's all about applying some of the things that we had learned, not just in school, but along the way in my career, in my academic career, or in my job, right? And how do I synthesize all of this together? And really the role of educators, it's to be that facilitator, to be that mentor in the time frame that we've been given or been entrusted with, right? To be that mentor and coach to our students, to inculcate that ability to think innovatively, the ability to synthesize information and come up with something that's completely original, that's something that's going to, be life-changing and things like that, right? So I think in that sense, I'm not too worried, about our students cheating. I wouldn't say cheating is the right word, right? So I would always then ask, what is the definition of cheating, right? Maybe Purna would be able to answer that question. But to me, yeah, I think it's not about checklists. It's not about you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and you get 100%, right? It's more about the application. It's more about thinking critically, creatively, and producing the best work that's out there and that's going to change lives. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more to that, Jennifer. That's so spot on. Purna, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's perfectly articulated by Jennifer. So yeah, in Turnitin also, we always emphasize on creating a formative environment for students, because that's really important to help them in the process. And like I mentioned during my presentation also, that there is always a concept of expected similarity. So we've seen most students are not looking at, whether you want to call it cheating or looking at any kind of misconduct, but, there are most of that comes out in the report is a inadvertent, and two may be triggered by other factors that could have been controlled better. So certainly that holds good. Thank you.
And yeah, and it's not always about cheating. Sorry, Jennifer. It's not about policing the students' work. It's about helping them improve the way that they do things. Yeah, yes, Jennifer, you want to add something?
No, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how the nature of our institutions, because law is our biggest area study. We have 4,000 over students there. Yes. And law, it's all based on the law, right? You can't avoid copying things from, the journals and things like that. And it's like what Purna said, it's inadvertent, right? You just got to, because you need to cite previous cases, you need to cite examples and things like that. And there are just certain ways of saying a certain thing that sometimes sounds exactly the same as somebody who had written it 10 years ago or whatever it is, right? You can't control that. But what we, as lecturers, as educators, we look at how the student argue. Because going back to the Bloom's taxonomy, it's about how a student is able to apply what they had learned and argue, debate, which brings good discussion and puts out good ideas for our lecturers to then have an exciting journey as they grade the paper.
and for us educators, it's about guiding them in finding the right way to do things. It's not about making them feel that, hey, you've done something wrong because you cheated. We want to take away that mindset. We want that mindset to change and make it more like, hey, we're here to help you improve. We're here to help you learn and find your way. That's why we have these tools. And one of many things I love about having tools like NEO and Turnitin, it doesn't have to take so much of our time to do this. With NEO, you have instant analytics. showing you how your students are performing. In that way, you can create an early intervention. You can provide them with assessments that develop their critical thinking skills, give it to the learners, check it using Turnitin, and then put them together and help the students. And then you provide the feedback that the students can use to improve their work, not to say that, hey, this is wrong and you need to change it. And this is kind of like, this is something that how we can help you improve your work, and not just say you cheated. We don't want that. We want our students to think more positively and inspire them to improve their work. So I think that's where um, mindset is going to come in, right? The change mindset among teachers. Any thoughts on how important the change mindset here? Because we know this. I think Jennifer and I specifically know this, that when we got used to MCQ, true or false memorization type of assessment that we're creating, that's kind of like probably the fastest way. But change mindset into, from closed book to open book. How important is the teacher mindset here?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, it's about no longer our lecturers or teachers or educators orators, right? I'm not telling you here's A to Z, go memorize, right? It's about me being a facilitator, to be that spark that basically inspires the student to want to know more, want to explore further, and be creative with things that they have in their heads, and how to present that to the world, right? So I think the mindset and the role of educators has changed tremendously. I think even more so after COVID, like you had mentioned, right? So yeah, I think we need to relook at our role as educators, and more importantly, what is in it for my student? What is it, say if I'm walking into a class, or if I'm going to give an assessment, what is in it for my student? How will this improve my student in his or her performance, whether in class or in the future at work and things like that, right? So what's in it? What's the impact that I want to bring
That's right.
for my student? That's very, very important. Yeah.
Thank you, Jennifer. Purna?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think, like Jennifer, and you rightly mentioned that I think it's important for teachers to be aware that of the differences in students in a class. I think not everyone learns at the same level, at the same pace, and that's all right. So when designing assessments, when designing assignments, can we keep that in mind, that the feedback you're providing, I did mention that one of the very important aspects is feedback being accessible. Now, it's important that it's accessible to all the students and not a few of them. So can we design our assignments as well as our feedback in a way that's accessible and that helps each person to learn at the pace that they're comfortable with? We know at some point they'll all reach the same point, but there's always that difference that comes in the path, which is true for us as well. So can we be more kind of aware of that and tweak our work that way so that can help the students in general?
Yes, that's adaptive learning, and that's making sure that no child is left behind. I agree. No students learn in different ways, different pacing. They have different learning needs, and what we want to do is to be able to provide a much more personalized learning environment for them. An environment that's adaptive to what they need. Oh, this has been great. I wish that we have more time. I wish that we have more time. Maybe next time we'll do our webinar 2-hour session. But thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you so much, Purna. Thank you to all of our participants today. We hope that you've learned a lot today. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to email us. We would be happy to answer those questions for you. So thank you so much, everybody, for your time today. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.